The heart monitor beeped slowly in the quiet hospital room as the single father struggled to breathe, and everyone around him believed his story was about to end. But what happened in the next few hours would change not only his daughter's life but the life of a nurse who had almost forgotten why she chose to care for people in the first place. Daniel Carter had never imagined his life would come down to a quiet hospital room and a single request he was too weak to even say properly. But that night, he gathered every bit of strength he had left, because the one thing he feared more than dying was leaving his little girl alone in a world that had already been cruel to them. The rain outside tapped softly against the hospital windows as Daniel stared at the ceiling, remembering the life he once had before everything fell apart, before the accident, before the hospital bills, before the long nights wondering how he would feed his daughter the next day. 3 years earlier, Daniel had been a construction worker in a small city where life was simple but honest. He worked hard every day and came home every evening to his daughter Lily, who would run to the door shouting "Daddy" with the kind of joy that made every long day worth it. Lily was only 5 years old when her mother left without a word, leaving behind a quiet house and a broken man who suddenly had to become both father and mother overnight. But Daniel never complained. He simply learned how to braid hair, pack school lunches, and read bedtime stories. Even when exhaustion pulled at his bones, he promised himself that no matter what happened, Lily would never feel abandoned again. But life has a strange way of testing promises. One cold winter evening, while Daniel was finishing a long shift at a construction site, a steel beam slipped from a crane and crashed down, sending workers running in every direction. The chaos lasted only seconds, but those seconds changed Daniel's life forever. He survived, but the injuries to his lungs and internal organs slowly began destroying his health. Doctors warned him early that the damage was severe and would likely shorten his life, but Daniel refused to think about that because Lily still needed him. For 2 years he fought harder than anyone expected. He took smaller jobs, drove delivery trucks, cleaned offices at night, anything that allowed him to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. But sickness has no sympathy for determination. Eventually the coughing grew worse, the hospital visits became longer, and the strength in his body slowly faded like a candle burning down to its final glow. The day he collapsed in front of Lily while making breakfast was the day everything changed. Now he lay in the hospital knowing the truth he had avoided for so long. He was running out of time. Across the room stood a nurse named Emily Carter, who had spent the last 10 hours moving between patients, adjusting 4 lines, checking charts, and quietly offering comfort where she could. Emily had once believed nursing was a calling, a way to make the world kinder, one person at a time. But years of long shifts and heartbreaking losses had slowly worn down that belief. To her, Daniel was simply another patient, another story that would probably end in silence. But Daniel looked at her with eyes that carried something deeper than fear. He motioned weakly for her to come closer. Emily leaned beside the bed, thinking he needed water or medication. Instead, Daniel whispered something that made her pause. He asked if she would help him fulfill one final wish. His voice was fragile but determined. He told her that he knew he might not leave the hospital, and there was only one thing he needed before that happened. He wanted to see Lily one more time, but he also wanted to leave her with something that would help her long after he was gone. Emily hesitated because hospital rules were strict. Visiting hours had ended and children were rarely allowed late at night in intensive care units. But something in Daniel's quiet desperation made it impossible for her to say no, so she asked him what he wanted to give Lily. Daniel slowly reached beneath his pillow and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a small silver necklace shaped like a star. He explained that Lily loved stars because every night they used to sit on the small balcony of their apartment, counting them together and imagining that each one was a dream waiting to come true. He wanted Lily to keep the necklace so she would remember that even when life became dark, there would always be light somewhere above her. Emily felt something stir in her chest that she had not felt in years. Hope. She looked at Daniel's trembling hands holding the necklace and realized that this man was not asking for a miracle for himself. He was asking for a future for his daughter. Without another word, Emily quietly stepped out of the room. Breaking the rules could cost her job, but some rules were never meant to stand in the way of kindness. She called a number Daniel had written on a small note. A tired voice answered. It was Daniel's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Hernandez, who had been caring for Lily while he was in the hospital. Emily explained the situation and asked if she could bring Lily to the hospital just for a few minutes. There was a long silence on the phone. Then the woman softly said yes. Nearly an hour later, the hospital doors opened and a small girl stepped inside holding the hand of Mrs. Hernandez. Her eyes wide with worry, Emily knelt down and gently introduced herself. Before leading them toward Daniel's room. As the door opened, Daniel turned his head slowly, and when he saw Lily standing there, his tired face lit up in a way that no medicine could ever create. Lily ran to the bed, tears already forming in her eyes. She hugged him carefully as if she could somehow protect him from the sickness. Daniel whispered to her, telling her how proud he was, how brave she had always been, and how she must never stop dreaming even when he was no longer there to watch over her. Then he placed the silver star necklace into her small hands. Lily looked at it with confusion before Daniel explained its meaning. He told her that every time she felt alone, she should look at the stars and remember that he was somewhere watching over her. The room filled with quiet tears. Even Emily struggled to hold back the emotions rising in her chest, but just as the moment seemed to settle into a sad goodbye, something unexpected happened. Daniel suddenly began coughing violently, and the heart monitor alarm echoed through the room. Doctors rushed in while Emily gently guided Lily outside. Minutes felt like hours as everyone waited in the hallway. Emily held Lily's hand, trying to offer comfort, though her own heart pounded with fear. Then the doors opened. The doctor stepped out with an expression that surprised everyone. Daniel was still alive, but something strange had happened during the emergency. While reviewing his scans, the medical team noticed something they had completely missed before. The damage in his lungs was not as final as they believed. A rare surgical procedure might actually give him a chance to survive, but the surgery was expensive and complicated, far beyond what Daniel could ever afford. Emily felt the weight of the moment pressing on her conscience. She looked at Lily sitting quietly clutching the silver star necklace, and suddenly remembered why she had become a nurse in the first place. That night, Emily did something no one expected. She wrote a long message about Daniel and Lily and posted it online, explaining the courage of a single father whose only wish had been to protect his daughter's future. Within hours, the story spread across the internet, touching thousands of hearts. By the next morning, donations began pouring in from strangers around the world, people who had never met Daniel but believed that a father who loved his child so deeply deserved a second chance. Within 2 days, the hospital had more than enough funds for the surgery. When Daniel woke and heard what had happened, he could barely speak through the tears in his eyes. The operation was scheduled immediately. It was long and risky, but after many tense hours, the doctors finally walked out with smiles instead of silence. The surgery had worked. Recovery was slow and painful, but day by day Daniel's strength began returning. Weeks later, he walked out of the hospital holding Lily's hand while Emily watched from the entrance, feeling a quiet warmth in her heart. Daniel hugged her with gratitude that words could barely express. He told her that sometimes a single act of kindness can change the direction of an entire life. Emily realized that the unbelievable moment Daniel had spoken about that night was not the surgery or the donations or even survival. It was the simple truth that when people choose compassion over indifference, miracles have a way of finding their path. Years later, Lily would still look at the stars with the silver necklace around her neck, remembering the night when hope refused to disappear, and the nurse who almost gave up believing in miracles would always remember the single father whose final wish reminded her that even the smallest kindness can echo across the world in ways no one ever expects.